Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. Commerce is alive and well in downtown Derry as the Chamber of Commerce welcomes a new business to the area. We here at the station were invited to the soft opening last night, and I'm here to tell you that the portions are unlike any other. Stay tuned during our lunch hour for your chance to win a free dinner at Red Lobstrosity. You're listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joshua Kahn, alongside CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
And Benjamin Graham.
Hey, constant readers.
And today, we are back on our journey to the Tower, because we are coming at you with the drawing of the three. What?
We are coming at you. So aggressive.
you look, I was afraid I messed up because you looked at me with alarm in your eyes.
It's because I have a lot of cum jokes for this.
Why?
Strong start for the episode. We are covering Drawing of the Three, our Patreon selection from Phil Thiessen, and we're covering through Shuffle with Cum Master General CM Alexander leading the march to the Dark Tower.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Phil, but as Josh was saying your name, I heard filthy. But it's Phil Thiessen. This is where my brain is.
Got it.
I just need you guys to consent to this journey.
I'm on board.
Otherwise, I'm doing it to you, and that's making me feel bad. All right, we open. Oh, I just have to say, too, I'm really excited to be back in the Dark Tower.
Right.
How long has it been?
Oh, my God.
Why would you ask that? You know time means nothing.
I feel like we've covered, I don't know, maybe 4 books since The Gunslinger, which is a good at least 6 months.
Probably like last year.
Yeah, probably last year. Probably 2 years ago, and
Fair.
I don't know time.
So we open with Roland waking up from a dream that he's drowning. And he realizes that he's Jake and not Roland, which brings him relief, because if he's Jake, he's not the guy who sacrificed a little boy who trusted him for his quest for the Dark Tower. But his relief is short-lived, because there are several things happening all at once very quickly in this opening.
This opening is fucking iconic.
It's
Yeah,
so good. I think we said that about The Gunslinger, too.
To be fair, it is also iconic. Here, before we talk about what actually happens, the reason it's so amazing is because in that first book, we see Roland, just the skills of a god.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that even in a weakened state, he was still that strong. And putting this handicap on him at the very top of this book for the rest of the journey is such a fucking great decision, I feel like.
You know what it is? The first book is the tutorial level of a Metroid game.
Yeah.
Where Samus has all of her abilities and upgrades, and then you fight a Metroid or whatever, and then whatever happens that downgrades all of her stuff, and you have to spend the rest of the game collecting all of your abilities. That's what this is.
It's a classic mother brain scenario.
We all like to be teased.
Give me what you got.
He cannot remember how he got to the beach or when he fell asleep, but the first upsetting thing that's happening is that the tide is coming in and he can feel the cold water rushing up his body, and that's what ultimately woke him up. And he, of course, immediately thinks of his guns, which, considering how prominent these guns are just in that first book, it really sets us up to think that that is the emergency.
Yes.
That's the only thing to worry about. Oh no, his guns and his bullets are going to get wet. That's bad. And that
Is it after he notices that his gun belt is wet? Is that the first time he thinks, I see hard times ahead?
I think so, yeah.
There are multiple times during these 10 pages or whatever where these progressively more catastrophic things start happening, and his entire reaction is rough days ahead. And that is Roland's such a hard ass.
Because he can't do anything about what's about to happen, which is that he is not alone on this beach. There is a creature there, and this is what we're talking about, guys, which I feel like it again Which is stupid because I know more people haven't gone on the journey to the Dark Tower as have read it, but this is an unforgettable moment reading this
Yes.
book. Which one of you would like to tell us what's on the beach with him?
I fucking love the lobstrosities. They are the most fucking D&D monster shit.
For
Yeah.
sure.
He looks up and there are these things that he keeps saying he's seen lobsters before. And that's not what this is. But where have we heard this before? But when he sees them, that's the closest thing his brain can latch onto is they have big ass claws, kind of like a lobster.
Yeah.
And eyes on stalks.
And it is walking towards him, and it keeps as the tide comes, the sound of the tide comes in, it stops and stands up straight, which is not a thing a lobster should be able to do, and puts its claws up in the air. And the whole time, Roland's coming out of this weird Golgotha trance that he's in. So it's all happening in slow motion. It's like a bad dream where he sees this horrible thing, but he's not reacting quickly enough to save himself from what happens.
He tries to get up.
Yeah. But he's been passed out essentially in that cold, so his body doesn't respond as fast as it normally does. And he gets a chunk taken out of him. Few chunks taken out of him.
Yeah, the lobstrosity. Guys, it takes 2 fingers of his right hand.
Takes the pointer and middle finger
And
from
it
the
does
right
it
hand.
so instantly.
Yeah.
Like his fingers are there and gone. And the thing moves, the way he describes it, he's like, it moves with a speed that was not indicated in anything else it did while he was, because he's kind of keeping it, in his periphery, but he's more concerned about his guns getting even more wet than they already are. So it's not really a priority for him at that moment.
I remember the first time reading this book. I was in high school, and I, of course, just devoured The Gunslinger, and picking this book up immediately afterwards. And the beginning of the book is him being permanently disabled.
Yeah.
It is not just he loses fingers. He loses the trigger finger on his shooting hand.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It is, and it just like him, he has such a nonplussed reaction to it where he's like, oh yeah, this is bad news. But he's so cool-headed that us as the readers are like, it takes a little bit to really pick up on how quest-endingly bad this is for Roland.
The first few times that he basically drops the gun because he instinctually goes for the right hand.
I love that how he talks about this action of picking up the gun and shooting it is so ingrained in him that it is a reflex. It is not something he has had to think about
Even
doing.
the pain of his injury can't stop that reflex.
Exactly. And it's like he hasn't had to think about shooting a gun in decades. And now he is like actively relearning how to juggle the gun in his offhand.
Yeah.
This is a good place. I have a question for you guys about this. Because this part's really upsetting because basically he's, as you said, Ben, he's basically this untouchable shooting machine that we spent all of this first book with. His guns and his skill are burned into our brains. It's like almost this magical combination. And as you're slowly like realizing the significance of that, it's and he's continuing to get like eaten as he's trying to crawl away because it gets his boot. It takes a chunk out of his leg. I did
about
too.
him losing
his
a toe.
Yeah, because it's the hands are so important.
Right.
And this happens in a matter of minutes. And in The Gunslinger, Roland was really coldly unrelatable. Do you guys think that opening with his like wish to be Jake and the regret he feels over what he did, coupled with that unexpected violent loss of his fingers, basically sets the readers up to view him as vulnerable from this point on? So I'd argue this Roland we are with, different dude.
it's at the very least the beginning of the change.
Yeah.
We get a lot of through it's, and we'll get into it more as we go into the book, is how amazingly well the book is at making us care about his sidekicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yep.
Yeah, it does such an amazing job at, we have this section where he's alone, but once we get to Eddie, we start seeing Roland through other people's eyes, which we have not gotten yet. And yeah, I think you're right. It does go a way of making him so much more vulnerable because up until this point, we had no reason to believe that Roland couldn't, like Eddie says, step over anyone in his way to get to the tower. And now because of this, he has to start
Relying on other people.
And I think the rest of the series is kind of him learning how to do that.
Yeah.
To what degree of success? We'll find out.
Well, and we learned from the first book that Jake, in the first place, he thought could have been something meant to slow him down. Another testament to him not wanting to slow himself down with other people and their worries and their concerns because of that single focus nature.
He doesn't even want a companion, let alone someone he has to allow to take care of him or in turn take care of.
Right.
Which is funny because, I mean, he's going to be drawing 3. Okay, one more really important question for you guys before we move on. We didn't mention what should be goofiness of the Lobstrosities.
Their questioning voice.
Yeah.
How is that in the audiobook?
Great.
Yeah?
I love
it's
it.
pretty good.
He does.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. It's
Frank Mueller.
Yes.
Frank Mueller.
Frank Mueller.
Which he did. The last thing we were with him on wasn't it The Mist or something?
I think he did The Mist. I think he did The Talisman.
Yeah. Yes. He's really great.
He's so good.
I mean, he's Frank Mueller.
Yeah.
Everyone loves Frank Mueller.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, he does the Lobstrosity gibberish really well. So my question for you guys is, if you were a Lobstrosity, what would your gibberish phrase be?
It would be did a chuck, da boom. and then I would do finger guns with my claws.
Nice. Love it.
Yeah,
Ben?
I'd just make clicking noises with my claws.
Go the full Zoidberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm just imagining these things as little Zoidbergs running around.
It makes them
Much,
scarier.
way less threatening.
Mine would be, did a chuck, did you come?
There it is. There.
Wonderful.
Worth it.
I see. That was, I immediately knew that's what you wanted, but then I was like, no, she's got this.
That's
under
what.
control.
Yeah, I had the same instinct of like I could go for it, but I know what she's got cooking.
I thought one of us would say it, and I didn't care who.
We all know it needed to be you.
So Roland finally gets to his feet, and he is able to defend himself.
Fucking crushes it with a rock.
He
Fucking
stomps the
rules.
shit out of this thing.
I would too.
Yeah, it's like this angry, like, you hurt me, and he's just beating it to a pulp.
Doesn't he have this like passing idea of when because he like stomps it to the point that its guts are spilling out, and he thinks about looking for his fingers.
No, he sees his
them.
fingers,
That's
and when he sees his fingers, and he can see like the dirt under the fingernail, like he sees it in detail.
Yeah, I mean, it's Roland's eyes.
He throws up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Fucking rules.
So he manages, injured and exhausted, to put some moderate distance between himself and the tide so he can address his wounds and his wetness. And instead of doing that, though...
I love how he sprinkles his tobacco on his stumps.
Yeah.
That kind of like field knowledge is so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not trying to compare an injury I've had to Roland losing his fingers.
Cannot wait.
But last May, I kicked off my summer break from school by reaching into something where there was a razor blade.
That's right.
I didn't realize it.
I
And I
forgot.
ran my pointer finger of my right hand, my shooting hand, right over it and took a chunk of skin that I could see in the blades off. And the way that it just poured blood out was so alarming. And it hurt.
Yeah, the human body will do that.
But it was one of those things where I was like, oh oh, I really fucked myself. Can't make it worse. And I grabbed a washcloth and just wrapped it around my finger and squeezed as hard as I could to stop the
Right.
blood.
I mean, you do what you have to do.
So
The human
just
body
saying,
is disgusting, and I hate it.
I'm like a
Fucking no joke.
gunslinger.
You're the gunslinger of this podcast.
Means I'd walk over you guys to get to the tower.
Yes.
Oh
Yep.
no, you're right.
I feel like we've had discussions about this that directly contradict that sentiment. Aren't you the one
Pet
that?
Cemetery?
That's what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah. I would be dragging you guys along behind me. Okay, so Roland passes out and dreams of his tarot card reading, and we are reminded in a really cool way of the 3 cards: the lady, the prisoner, and death.
But not for you.
Roland then wakes up to tend to his wounds and his guns. But first, he gets a little bit distracted by the vastness of the sea. And I just want to mention this because it's, we spent a whole book with him wandering through this like wasteland, kind of, this post-apocalyptic, almost desert world. And heard, kind of had those flashbacks to when he was growing up and things were different. But just for him to be like, wow, I've heard about it, but I've never seen it. And he can't see past. It's like infinite, it looks.
The coastline is every bit as the desert. I have a vision in my mind. It is why there will never be Mike Flanagan. God bless you. Godspeed, friend. There can never be an adaptation of The Dark Tower that will completely
Right.
Hit all the boxes, because I have such a vivid picture in my head of what the desert looks like. And it is the exact same thing for this coastline. The dreariness of it, the desolateness of it is awesome.
I think it's probably still not quite as apparent in this book. It was a little more the gunslinger, and I think it becomes more of a piece. But the world, Roland's world that has moved on, is such a distinct character in and of itself. And it's at every turn, I feel like, thinking about this book and then thinking beyond it too, you can perfectly picture his world.
Yeah. I love that we went from a desert book to, yes, we are next to the ocean, but it's almost the exact same problem because the sight lines don't change. And so there's still that feeling of I could wander forever but at least I can only go north-south here as opposed to the desert where you could go anywhere.
There's a few points in this where I was struck with just the vastness of the environment, especially later on when Eddie comes over for the first time, and we'll get to it.
We'll get to it.
His view of like coming out into this endless, completely empty world. Is
Seems
awesome.
like there can't be anything else.
Yeah.
So Roland takes care of his guns and bullets. His, everything is damp or just soaked. And he's sorting out the shells that are dry, the ones that might still work, and the ones that are completely soaked, so they are no good. He also notices that his ruined hand is turning red. The palm is red. So he suspects that he's got an infection. The lobstrosities may be poison. Who knows what's going on. So having done what he can with his equipment and wounds, he forces himself to walk north as far as he can while he's got any amount of strength left.
Can we talk about the what his resources have dwindled down to also at this point?
Beef jerky, which I feel like has been all he's had available to him for years.
Because I think it's as he's doing up the bullets, which it says he went from 50 bullets to 20 maybe.
Yeah.
And then he eats the last of his beef jerky and he has like half of his water left.
Yeah, he's got 2 water skins.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah. Hard days ahead.
And he makes it about 4 miles, which takes him 3 hours to walk, which is an incredibly, staggeringly slow pace. When something very strange happens, and this is one of those moments that, we ask, sometimes we talk about this on our Merry Derry Christmas episodes, like if you could go back and see any movie for the first time, what would it be? And why is that a thing? I wish I could reread this for the first time when he sees a door on the beach that leads to like freestanding magical door.
Yeah.
Real quick, it's wild to me that this trip takes 3 hours because by the time he reaches the door, he is like, I'm dead. I cannot physically keep going. God forbid you have 2 fingers on your hand chomped off by a giant monster. It has to be poison because an infection doesn't happen that
quick. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because he passes out for 16 hours before
Yeah.
that. So it's been less than 24
Yeah.
hours and the infection has gotten that far.
Yeah, because it eventually, I think it's shortly after this, that it's running. He can see like the red lines running up his arm. He knows eventually that'll get to his heart, and then that's it.
I think he realizes the lines are down his arm or like have gone higher when he's eaten a popkin.
Yeah, so he sees a door, and there are words written on it in high speech. It says the prisoner. He can hear sounds around the door. Must be something coming from the other side, the sounds of motors. But he walks around, he investigates, and you want to explain what this is like?
It's gone.
Yeah.
It's like a magic photo, essentially. Once he looks around it, circles around it, at a certain point, it just isn't there anymore.
Except its shadow is still there.
Shadow's still there, which is fucking insane. But he steps back, and it's not like it, fades into existence. It's just there, and then not there.
Ben, do you want to tell us what happens when he opens it the first time?
He screams. He says he like screams for the first time in a very, very long time in genuine terror because he looks out and it looks like he is in the clouds. He is looking down on this
lush,
impossible view. And he slams the door and he's like, fuck that. Nuh-uh.
He slams the door, and his first thought as this is happening is, if I step through that, I'm just going to plummet to my death. So he closes his door, and then this is where Court is in his head. He talks to him sometimes.
Which we also get a lot of it.
Yes.
A lot more than I remembered in this
too,
book.
which I
Well, a lot of
love.
different characters.
Yeah.
It's just Roland's past speaks to him a lot. 'Cause
Yeah.
sometimes it's Court, sometimes it's Martin. A couple
His
times
dad.
he thinks that it's his dad, Steven.
Steve, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Like Stephen King.
What?
What the fuck?
That would be insane for
Blew
him
my
to
mind.
write himself as a main character.
That
in
would
this
never
book. That's
happen.
fucking
That would be
madness.
the
What?
dumbest
He's not
thing.
going to do that, you guys. Okay, anyway. So he thinks he'll fall, and then he's talking to himself in someone else's voice saying, like, you saw more than you're letting yourself see. And he realizes that he was looking at the earth at a great height through a window. So he's going to open the door again, and
His fucking brain is so
It's
awesome.
so smart.
The recall. He opened the door, looked at something that scared the fuck out of him for a second, shut the door, and he still has that level of recall that once he's calms down, he can make the picture in his head again. It's fucking awesome.
3 of us would have just laid down in front of the door and died.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then somebody would have come along and been like, "What, really? You didn't even..."
Sometimes I forget about stuff that I'm currently looking at. Sometimes I will set my phone down. It never leaves my field of vision, and I set it down and go, "Where'd my phone go?" I'm not.
Are you okay?
No, I'm not. What I'm trying to say is I'm not cut out to be a gunslinger, everyone.
We're going to put a pin in that, and we'll talk after the episode.
ADHD is a hell of a thing, folks.
Okay, so Roland opens the door again. What did you guys think of his initial assessment of what he now allows himself to observe?
I love that he loses his mind about how much paper there is.
It made me feel like a wasteful piece of shit, honestly.
Just a resource that they don't have a ton of in his world since it's moved on.
Yeah,
It was like gold.
Everywhere.
He looks across the aisle and sees a guy wad up a piece of paper that he had only written on half of it, and Roland just turns and throws up.
I like too that he sees like the newspaper print and the words look familiar, but he can't understand them. Like when you get directions to build something, and I always somehow the first one I open up to is Spanish version, and I'll get like 3 sentences in before I'm like, I can't speak Spanish. But my brain
You're
is,
giving me shit? Are you okay?
no. I also like he doesn't like he's shocked that none of these men have weapons.
Yeah. And the women wear pants.
Yeah, and he's never seen a woman dressed in pants except for fucking.
No, he's never seen where a girl's crotch meets her legs
He's
unless
seen
they're
that plenty.
fucking.
Okay.
Unless they're
Yeah,
fucking. That's
yeah.
how he phrases it. They've never seen where the legs meet the crotch.
And he immediately calls the people he sees sheep. Like he can tell that they're soft. Well, and by comparison to him, they are.
Yeah, I mean,
they
yeah.
are soft
Because
little.
they live in the light.
Yeah. Which is a fascinating, him thinking about like, you know, people really bitch about how my world has moved on, but now that I see how soft living in the light makes people, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Which is a really dark thought because Roland's world is rough.
Yeah, I'll live soft.
Yeah, soft. So it's about here where he's coming to realize what's actually going on because the flight attendant, who he thinks of as like a military
army woman.
an army woman, yeah. She comes right up to the door and doesn't react the way she should if she's looking at Roland. And she asks him if he'd like, I assume, refreshments. He doesn't understand the word. This is also cool because there's a lot of shared language between Eddie and Roland's world, but it's different. And he has to kind of rifle through his head to find things. And Eddie, he hears a voice. We come to find out it's Eddie, of course, orders a gin, and he knows what that is. So now he knows that he is looking through the eyes of the prisoner. He just doesn't know his name.
It's the disorienting feeling when he realizes that he's looking through someone's eyes because even though he's looking right, they look left, and then he's like, "Oh God, give me a
Very
second."
disorienting, yeah.
Yeah.
And when Eddie gets up and moves, it's just the viewpoint of that shift when you're not the one doing it. It makes me feel like it must feel sort of like VR, like the first time you put on the VR glasses. So we jump to Eddie, who gets up and goes into the restroom.
The back and forth in
I
this
love
first
it, yeah.
section is fucking great. I forgot. I know we're like going to get to it shortly, but Eddie's blackouts on the plane.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten all about that aspect of this. I remember like the things that happened, but I forgot that the blackout part happens and getting those. I blacked out. Here's what I did. Cut back to what Roland did. It's fucking great.
So he is walking with Eddie to the restroom, and he sort of sees Eddie's hand, so he knows it's a male. And when Eddie gets into the restroom and he looks into the mirror, Roland recognizes his face from the tarot card.
Which it was a baboon with its fingers gripped into his back so much the fingertips were under the flesh. And it was also carrying a whip on his back.
Yes. And Roland realizes that Eddie is also sick, and the way he looks reminds him of Nort, the weed eater from Tull. And he realizes that heroin is like the devil's grass, and he acts on instinct, and he steps through the door. He comes inside of Eddie.
Yep.
So this is where, okay, try to keep this straight. This is where we bounce back to Eddie, ordering his gin and tonic. And this is kind of where we meet Eddie's brother, Henry, sort of.
Fuck, I hate Henry so much.
Oh, yep.
Are we ever going to meet a good Henry? Stephen King does not like Henrys.
Yeah. Henry, it's a villain name.
Henry's this Henry, though, is a tragic figure.
Yes.
He is, very
for
much.
Sure.
Because we find out that him and Eddie just had kind of rough, shitty childhoods. And now they're heroin addicted, mobbed up losers.
Yeah.
We don't know much about Henry quite yet. We find out more about him at the end. But it's
feel
clear.
like we know everything we need to know about Henry
Right.
as Eddie discusses cool turkey, I think. That tells me everything I need to know about Henry. And it's this concept of, because he constantly refers to Henry as the sage junkie, that going cold turkey is a mistake. It's never going to work. But if you go cool turkey, then it makes it, then it's totally in your control if you're going cool turkey.
Right. Yeah. Because that's how that works.
Yeah. And it tells you the excuses he's willing to make for his behavior and for himself to not see it.
And Eddie is buying into those excuses because this is what he uses to excuse what he's about to do, which is to get up to go to the bathroom to take a hit. Is it a hit if it's cocaine?
He has a small
I'm not that cool.
amount.
I don't know what to call it.
A very, very small amount of heroin in a baggie that the guy he had went down to, where is he coming from?
The Bahamas.
The Bahamas. He went down to the Bahamas on behalf of this monster of a mob boss. Balazar, who we will meet in a little while. And met with this creep in a hotel room that tried to give him
bad drugs.
bad drugs. Yeah, now that he is heading back to New York, smuggling a large amount of cocaine under his shirt.
2 pounds.
He is like, I got to go through customs soon. I better do this heroin.
I better go through cool turkey.
I don't want to give them a reason to be suspicious.
I
better get on heroin.
He's experiencing withdrawal because he's really far into his junkie journey. And sorry, junkie's probably like a mean thing to say because he has an addiction, but that's the language used in this book.
Yeah.
And so he wants to be cool turkey for getting through customs. We just get a little bit of insight into Henry and Hetty's lives. So Eddie thinks about a time when they were only snorting drugs, not shooting up. So we can kind of see like how that progression happens. So he makes his way to the bathroom, and when he looks in the mirror there, he has a sense that he's being watched, and he notices that his hazel eyes, don't look right.
Fucking cool as hell.
They look blue and cold and
Bombadier's
awesome.
eyes.
Bombadier's eyes is such a cool description.
Do Bombadier's eyes usually have seagulls in them? Because he can also, he sees a seagull reflected in his eyes. And then all of a sudden, that disappears. But for just a moment, he feels like he's two people. And he hears the thought, I've come through, I'm in the sky carriage. And then Eddie throws up, which is what you would do, right?
Yeah.
And this is where we get his first, I call them blackouts, blankouts, whatever. He loses time, something that has never happened to him before.
And he again, we're using all the justification we can. It must be the going cool turkey that's doing it, combined with the stress. That must be why I'm blacking out.
We pop back to Roland as he's thinking about coming through the thought that Eddie heard. Question for you guys. Would you let Roland come deep inside of you?
Oh, yeah. He's a strong man.
On a Saturday?
If it was that or get arrested by customs with 2 pounds of cocaine, yeah.
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 You'd let a man come in you?
Oh, yeah. If it gets me out of going to federal prison.
Yeah.
Usually it's the other way around.
I mean, I got nothing going on.
These are all real cheap shots.
Sam?
Thank you for... Oh, yeah, I'd let Roland come inside me. We know this. Duh. He was my first book crush. I have good taste in men.
That's true. The values have translated.
I can change him.
Oh, no.
He's so vulnerable.
Oh, God.
All you have to do is cut off your
Martian here.
fingers and I'm... Oh, my God. Wow.
Fucking brutal.
That hurts me
Fucking
so
cold,
many different ways.
I can change him.
I know, but... Ooh, okay. Roland understands that he just instinctually gets these things, which is really cool. He can take over Eddie's body. Although right now, he's still referring to him as the prisoner. And so he takes a step forward, and that is the blackout that Eddie experienced. And Roland, he's testing some theories, which is really great. He wants to know what happens when he steps through, what happens to that door on the other side. He doesn't think he's going to get stuck again. He's just operating on instinct. But he looks behind himself and sees the door and sees him. Are you picturing it the way I'm picturing it? Describe.
Splayed out like a drunk passed out, like who made it just to their front door and then passed out. Yeah, that's what it looks. I imagine.
Yeah, his physical body obviously is still back on the beach, laying unconscious in front of the door. So of course he thinks what all of us are thinking. Wow, the Lobstrosities they're going to be a problem eventually, so I'm going to have to move my body. We come back inside of Eddie for a minute, who is attributing the strangeness of what's happening to his withdrawal symptoms. He does make his way back to his seat, where the flight attendant asks him if he would like anything else. And
Nosy ass flight attendant.
well, she's about to be nosy, because as he's going to tell her no thanks, he blanks out again and does like what I wish I could do, like just like black out and order food and then be surprised. Like it always, yeah, like, woo, what did I get this time? Roland has stepped forward again and he orders a popkin. He's like, Miss, Army Miss, I'm terribly hungry. Can I have something to eat? And she's like, oh, well, we're going to serve you the in-flight dinner soon. And he's like, I can't wait, please. She's like, okay, I can make you a tuna fish sandwich.
And he's like,
quick.
none of the words you just said make any goddamn sense.
He mispronounces so.
I love tutor fish. Tutor fish is great.
In almost any media, this is my least favorite bit.
Except with Roland.
I always think I mispronounce words. It is such a Rugrats ass like joke.
It's childish.
Yeah. It's almost never funny. That and like the bit in sitcoms and stuff where someone has a name that is spelled very silly, but it's pronounced just slightly different.
Like Penelope instead of Penelope.
Or what usually the joke is that it's like in Metalocalypse, there's Dr. Twinkletits, but it's spelled Twinkle Tits.
Got it. Yeah.
It's such a dumb bit.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. But
I do love Metalocalypse.
I do. But I like this bit. Roland thinking that sandwiches are called popkins is such just like a cutesy joke that doesn't fit his personality. I love this hard ass cowboy just being like, I just want a popkin. It's like, aw, little guy.
Coming out of him, it's just, I don't know.
It's the added.
It makes him more vulnerable.
Well, it's the added fantasy aspect of, as we're reading all of this, the entire first book that we read this, we're reading in our language. But this tells us that a whole time when we've been hearing Roland talk, he's not speaking English.
Yeah.
He's speaking this other.
It's a real Star Trek Universal Translator scenario. Yeah.
Which is really, really cool. It's a neat idea, and it's handled pretty well, I think.
There's a great example of it later when they're talking about the devil's weed / cocaine, where in Eddie's perspective it says, I heard devil's weed, but I also heard cocaine. And I think that's a really cool.
I thought you were going to mention the part where Roland has sugar for the first time.
I love
we'll
that.
get to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's cool because she reacts to Popkins like, huh? And Roland, sharp as ever, sees that he used the wrong word. He rifles through
rummages
Eddie's mind,
through Eddie's
the Mind Palace,
yeah,
to get the word for sandwich. And she offers to make him that sandwich or take it by force, actually.
Rustle it. Yeah. I'd love I'll rustle it up for you. And he pauses like,
Jesus Christ, what?
Woman. I am in another man's body.
For him, rustle up means to take a woman by force. So she basically tells him she's going to rape him a sandwich.
Which is not, it's not a funny word.
And no, right after that.
But it's odd.
Roland pulls out of Eddie. Henry is also inside of Eddie, reassuring him that it's just nerves, man. Eddie's wondering what's actually happening to him, though, because while he's having these blackouts, he's not having any other of the, common symptoms that he would be expecting to have. He otherwise feels really good, and he's actually really sleepy, which, again, if I was trying to clear the customs ritual with 2 pounds of heroin, I wouldn't be sleepy.
And it's all this behavior, and goes back to the stewardess with the, oh God, I made this guy a sandwich, and of course he's asleep. I'm going to just throw that away later. And then a second later, she turns to do something, turns back, and it's gone. And then she thinks he's a terrorist.
Yeah. Well, she thinks he's a terrorist because when he ordered the gin, he had hazel eyes.
Yes.
He got up and went to the bathroom, and then he ordered a sandwich, and he had blue eyes. And she's like, it's probably, he got up to take his contacts out so he could take a nap.
The contacts talk throughout this section. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but he starts to I love when he blacks out with the sandwich ordering, and then he comes to again not knowing who ordered a sandwich, and his hand hurts.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
So he falls asleep, and as this happens, this is where Roland kind of sees like a movie or a play, the details of why Eddie is on the plane.
I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 lately.
Okay.
And in said game, you're infected with mind flare tadpoles in your brain that allow you to psychically connect to other people.
Gross.
Cool.
Yeah, right. And there are moments where, sharing backstory, it's dialogue back and forth. But instead of doing that, they utilize that to have the characters link tadpoles. And essentially,
Sweet.
you get to see firsthand memories that the person is trying to share with you.
So while Roland is inside of Eddie, they're linking tadpoles.
Yeah, they've got their tadpole tails linked.
On Saturday? I got nothing else to do.
we kind of already talked about this. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to add here?
This is the first we see of Eddie's steal. Like Eddie, the reason that he was chosen to do this smuggling job is because even though he is addicted to heroin, even though he is currently in a weak state because of his past, because of his addiction and whatnot, there is something in him that is inherently kind of fucking tough.
He knows how to strap it on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he reminds Roland of, okay, the audiobook pronounces it Cuthbert. I've always said Cuthbert.
I've always said Cuthbert.
Can we just agree to say Cuthbert?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, listeners, if you say it different. Why do you do that? It feels bad coming out of my mouth.
Uncouthbert of you.
Wow.
Thank you.
So Eddie sees the weakness, Ben, that you described, but he also sees that steal. And while Roland is sorting out what all of this means, the flight attendant, Jane, is starting to come up with a plan because she just can't let go of the fact that this guy has contacts.
Yeah, he's not hot enough to have contacts.
I love that rationale.
I'm giving Jane shit, but I love her. She's like really cool.
You're a big fan of Jane?
She's kind of a gunslinger. Like
She's a
she knows
fucking
what's
narc.
up. Well, she thinks he's gonna shoot people on the plane. She doesn't know it's drugs. So.
Yeah, no, I think I'm more angry at the other once she
Susie?
Yeah, the other flight attendant. It's like she's
all
not a terrorist.
Excited about it.
He's smuggling drugs. Let's fucking be real cops.
Let's throw coffee in his face.
I guess for me, she seems like a gunslinger because we had Roland reflecting on his training and the teaching of Court. Sorry. I was thinking Cuthbert, and so I almost said Bort. And Jane, the reason that her suspicions are up is because her training instructor's voice is in her head talking about how flight attendants, after something happens, nobody knew it was going to happen, but you always get a few people, usually the flight attendants who are usually women at this time in society, saying, oh, there's something about that person that bothered me. And the problem isn't that they didn't say anything. The problem is that they forgot about that suspicion. And so I see a parallel
that's such
there
a cool
that
thing
I really
too, that
like.
it's not that they didn't do anything. It's that they forgot.
Yeah. Which kind of goes with Roland's idea of these people living in the light kind of being soft. And Jane doesn't forget. And I just really like that. So as this is happening, we'll get to what Jane is about to do. But Roland realizes that he can get back to his body fine with no trouble, but he's hoping he can take the sandwich back too. And the man in black, his Henry in his head, speaks up in his mind and says that he can stay in Eddie's body. He can just leave his dying one there and move on. But Roland does not want to do that. And I don't blame him because I don't know. Eddie would have to be really hot for me to do that.
He's got two more people to come into before the end of this book.
Yeah.
It's interesting that he does have this moment where he was like, no, obviously I'm not going to stay in this weird alien world that isn't my own, because of later on when he realizes the reason he's here is to do that to Eddie.
Yeah.
Is he kind of comes to he's like, wait, why is this door here? What is the purpose of all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm here for the drawing. I am here to draw Eddie into my world. And if my quest for the tower is going to happen, I have to expect this man to give up everything he knows. He even says the thing that I would not
Do myself.
do myself. I expect of this stranger.
Yeah. So when he does it, we, the reader, know he knows exactly what he's doing, which is, I love that.
I think that's one of the best things about Roland is I think at one point Eddie even says as much when it's around the conversation of, you'd step over me, but it's just recognizing that they operate differently. Roland can't understand why someone would care so much because he's never cared that much.
Yeah, he doesn't need people.
Yeah.
I do love here we keep getting reminders about his injury because as he steps back through with the sandwich, the one half falls out of his hand because he's missing his fingers. I love his experience, though, of eating this sandwich because he devours it, sand and all. And because I feel like he's been eating nothing but beef jerky for years. Even though it's been like a year since we read The Gunslinger, it's all like right there.
He had 2 burgers in Tull.
Yeah, that's true. Slow mutant burgers.
Yeah, slow mutant burgers. Oh, yeah, and beans.
Yeah. I just remembered the stupid reference to the beans. When Jane comes back to check on Eddie, she sees he's asleep, but the sandwich is gone and she's going to keep an eye on him. We're about 45 minutes to landing when Eddie wakes up and he's surprised by how soundly he was asleep. He goes to the restroom again to check on his drugs and put his contacts back in. Everything is looking good and he's thinking, I got to get through customs. I need to snort more of the drugs to even myself out. Makes his way back to his seat, feeling increasingly uneasy, though. There's like a steel wire, he describes, that's tightening around his chest.
Those gunslinger instincts.
Yep. And the cocaine hits him, but it doesn't have the cooling turkey effect he wants. And he blanks out again for a minute. The plane begins its descent. Now, this is where Jane's like, okay, Eddie's a terrorist. He took out his contacts for a nap and then he put them back in. What monster would do that? Which one of you would like to describe what she decides she's going to do to save all these? She's bold.
Okay, if she thinks he's going to hurt people, she goes to her friends like, hey, switch sides with me while we go in for landing because I want to keep an eye on this guy. And she points him out and they go and they land.
Well, she gets a thermos.
Oh, that's right. She grabs a thermos of hot coffee, and the second he goes for a weapon, she's going to douse him in hot coffee.
Yeah, she's got the lid like loosely on there.
Yeah, which doesn't sound safe while you're landing
and
in a
she
plane.
Even thinks that. She's like, man, I might burn myself.
Yeah. But she's watching him, and at some point he leans over, and she's like, this is it. It's go time. And she even says she sees an Uzi in his hand before realizing it's just his boarding pass or whatever. But they land and nothing happens. And immediately she's like, oh, God,
I owe you dinner, Susie.
Yeah,
I'm an idiot.
I'm so dumb. Like I was overreacting, whatever. And her friend, the fucking narc, is like, well, you were watching his hands. I was watching his shirt. And when he bent over, I saw that he has a bunch of cocaine strapped under his armpits. So good job. Let's make it our business to...
We got to go tell the captain.
Yep. Who's going to tell customs? And Eddie's going to have a lot of explaining to do. While this is happening, Roland, I love...
This is my favorite part.
Do you want to describe it?
Yeah, because all this is happening and Eddie's, of course, he's like white knuckling it because he's afraid of making it through customs reasonably. But he's so focused on just acting normal and like going through the motions and not standing out in any way. He has not noticed that the jig's already up.
Yeah.
Roland, however, is Roland and is immediately clocking the stewardesses and be like, they know everything. Game over. We have to do something else. And he knows what that thing is, but he can't do it alone.
And he doesn't quite grasp the entirety of the problem either until kind of the very end, because he's like, okay, we got it. By the way, next time we travel out of the country, we are going to post about clearing the customs.
Yes.
We have to.
I love that everything to Roland is rituals.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is, though. We just don't think of it that way.
The priests of the customs let them through. It's the same. It's one of the things I love about Roland so much, because even the little daily things that he does earlier when he was cleaning his gun, it wasn't just he's cleaning his gun. He was going through the ritual of cleaning.
Yeah.
The ritual. It makes him, it's such a cool world building bit, because it makes him not just this cool cowboy. It's the priestly of what he does. It adds a fantasy element to it. I think it's really cool.
It is really cool. It just gives it that richness.
Yeah.
I also like while he's figuring out, like, okay, I need to figure out how to get him through the customs, because if he doesn't clear this ritual, he's going to get jailed and then I'm going to die because he won't be able to help me get medicine. And so he understands that he needs to take care of the drugs for Eddie, and he experiments by taking a coin from Eddie's pocket back with them, and that works. And he comes back through, but he adds a bullet from his world to see if he can bring things from his world in, and the bullet does not make the journey. It's with his body by the door. And so
he can get cocaine out.
Yep. And so he's like, okay, this is it. We're going to clear the customs. But then, of course, as things are coming to the final moment, he realizes, shit, like, we're not even going to get to the customs. I need to get this stuff off him right now. And when I do, he's going to freak out because the thing he risked his life for will all of a sudden be gone. And he's going to stand out in a way that we don't want, because he's going to lose his shit.
Yeah.
So Roland is like, okay, let's meet.
Yeah, he starts talking to Eddie.
And Eddie thinks he's going crazy for a minute. And
He thinks he has his earbuds on.
Oh, that's right.
He doesn't.
And like Roland calls him a fool for like, just listen to me.
I love that he goes, he is court.
Yeah.
For a minute, because that's how he sees Eddie as this child, basically, because he doesn't know how he knows that he is of this soft world, and his first instinct in interacting with this person who he needs to cooperate is to go full drill sergeant.
Yeah.
Eddie responds to it, though, because it's the command reminds him of Henry, telling him what to do, because Henry's the older brother who, quote unquote, looked out for him. So he listens, and Roland explains his plan to Eddie. We don't get that right now, but it's pretty clear what it's going to be. So as people start to get off the plane, Eddie, and he can see now the captain pretending not to look at him, but basically staring straight at him for 5 solid minutes. He makes his way back to the bathroom, and they try to stop him, and he's like, I have diarrhea.
I'm pooping right now.
And once in the bathroom, Roland pulls Eddie into his world.
This fucks with me so bad, because the way he's like, okay, I need you to work with me here. Turn around. Now, the thing, when Roland's in Eddie's head and he says he wants to go back to his world, he says he turns around. Well, obviously, he's like inside Eddie's head. So he's like mentally turning around, not physically.
Yeah.
But having this working with Eddie, I can just so clearly picture this otherworldly door hovering behind him just out of sight. And then with Roland's help being like, no, you can turn around, and turning around and see, it's
so cool.
Fucking scary. It's really cool.
I also love that it doesn't, a lot of the magic of the doors, we don't spend time trying to justify, make it make sense. It is
the
just
best.
Yeah. Well, and as we see more of it, it becomes more obvious that how, I don't know, intrinsically connected the magic is, how specifically connected the magic is.
Yeah, it's
that
like very personal to them.
I feel like it lets it get away with a lot, because it's more about the connection between them than it is anything else.
Yeah, it's like the physical manifestation of their ka.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you mentioned him kind of speaking in Court's voice, though, because I made a note much later that I think it's funny that by the end of our reading section here, although Roland doesn't, quote unquote, waste time asking why Eddie, he seems to notice all of these traits in a child gunslinger and repeatedly calls them out, but never seems to make the connection in his head that those values all add up until, I mean, I guess that's the payoff when Eddie finally gets sober and all that. But
Yeah, it's because Roland, that goes to his like lack of humor and romanticism, I think. He thinks of things, he's very sharp and very smart, but he's also very like black and white.
Yeah.
He doesn't spend time on things that aren't necessary. He's not a philosopher. It's like, is that going to benefit me thinking about that? No, move on.
Yeah.
It is really interesting. So we are on the beach now, Eddie and Roland together. We don't have to talk about it, but just the description of Roland from Eddie's eyes is really cool.
The one thing I do want to talk about, because it's just them frantically working on taking off
While the door's being like pounded on.
Yeah, this like thick duct tape basically that's all around Eddie. The part that I want to talk about is Roland has this big ass sharp knife that they're using to try and cut.
Well, he hands it to
off.
Eddie and he's like, "Don't cut yourself, it's sharp."
And he immediately does. And he's like, "I can't do this, man. Can you do this?"
Well, because he can't see, like it's right under his armpits.
And Eddie is like, when he first sees Roland, he's like, "Oh, this guy's a ghost," because he's dead as shit.
Yeah.
But he's like, "I can't do this, man. You have to do it." And he hands the knife to Roland, and he sees Roland's hand shaking, and he's like, "I'm fucked. This guy's gonna cut me open." And Roland, there's this moment, this is what I want to talk about. Roland stares at his hand and wills it to stop.
Yeah.
That's cool enough on its own. The fucking awesome part is that Eddie standing next to him, Roland's self-imposed willpower is so strong. Eddie can feel the Roland washing off of him. It's so cool. It makes Roland this like I said, it's near when your willpower is so strong, it is nearly magic. Like that's so cool. It's the same as in the first book where I think we talked about how he can will himself to not need water.
Right.
Yeah.
Like how unbelievably cool is that?
Yeah.
He can will himself to no longer be shaking because he is actively dying. Like,
and then
awesome.
once he does that, it's just child's play. Just gun. Let's be done.
It's a really tense scene. We're not talking about it that way because we're just like so fascinated.
It's a very tense scene that ends very silly.
Yeah, because the whole time this is happening, they can hear the pilot and everybody on the other side telling them to open up. And Roland's he's telling Eddie, like, hurry it the hell up, man. You got to move.
Yeah, he says, if that door opens before we're done, you're going to be stuck here forever and without me after very long because I'm dying.
So Eddie returns to his world at just the last second, hops on the toilet, tucks his shirt tail over his junk.
I love that he starts to put his shirt back on and then realizes it's more important for him to take off his pants.
Yes. Like the captain is takes him off the toilet and is like, "Ha! There's no poop in there." So like, I fucking got him.
Yeah, and then he's like, "Yeah, sometimes that's the problem, isn't it?"
I hate all of these fuckers that work for the airport. I hate every single one of them.
They're so jazzed up to...
Yeah, they're all like pounding on the door and they bring in the DEA and the pilot is like fucking trying to big dick the DEA.
Yeah.
My plane. But then it keeps mentioning how many other of the pilots are like, who used to do cocaine a lot on his day. And they're all like, "No, we got to get this asshole." I'm like, "You fucking bootlicker pieces of shit. I hate you."
So they drag him out of the bathroom. They let him pull his pants up, which is nice. But let's talk about the interrogation, which maybe it's just the timing of it, but I immediately thought of 11/22/63. Well, because we have Jake and George being interrogated.
Yeah.
Now we have Eddie and Roland being interrogated. It's like that duality, except it is two different people this time.
This is the part where Eddie is such a fucking good character.
He really is.
There are so many parts about Eddie Dean that I feel like in a different book, in a different character, I would find annoying. His like quippiness in other characters, I could definitely find like, oh, this guy.
Well, he's only quippy like that when
to disarm other people.
Yes, that's not his like everyday personality trait.
Yeah.
So it's not annoying.
And
it's like a tool.
It comes off really well.
Yeah.
Like he's the part when they're dragging him out of the bathroom and he's like, can the stewardesses go away? I'm modest. I got a lot to be modest about. And I'm like,
but I swear,
this dude rules.
It describes him holding his fingers like a couple inches apart. Like, are we talking width then? Because I guess that's pretty rad. That's pretty rad.
I didn't know you were a girth queen.
Oh, I'm not.
And moving on.
So basically during this interrogation, they know Eddie's a junkie. They have him take his, they strip him down to his boxers. By the way, we didn't mention this, but this is like the 80s that we are in right now. They can see where the tape line was because his skin's all red and he's feeding them bullshit about getting a rash in the Bahamas.
Quick on his feet.
Well, and they find fibers and he's like, yeah, the wind was blowing as I was, topless running to catch my flight because I fell asleep.
It's such a cool bit where he's like, he's coming up with all of this, but the fact of the matter is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like he could tell whatever lies he wanted
knows that.
because they have nothing.
Yeah. There's nothing flushed. There's nothing on his body. There's nothing up his body except Roland.
and one
that
guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Except two men.
Except two other men in the
deep inside of him. And it's he just plays it cool, but the whole time, because Roland has to leave him for a minute to move his body. Man, and we find out later, he's miserable. Like, sorry it took me so long. I had to crawl.
I had to crawl 20 feet.
That one line, I don't know if it's the way it was delivered in the audiobook or if it's just a really good line.
Yeah.
Because that is another moment, to me, felt like Roland being incredibly vulnerable.
Yes. Like he'd never say that.
Exactly. How awful it must be to him, this fucking nearly superhuman murder machine, that he has to admit that he had to crawl because that is all he can do.
Yeah. And the whole time Eddie keeps looking behind himself to check on the door. Like
he sees the lobstrosities.
Yeah. It is amazing how quickly he is like connected to Roland in a way that he finds comfort by his presence. Because he's like borrowing his willpower almost in a way.
A little bit, yeah.
It's also, he also at one point specifically says, like, he says, good luck, friend, and then stops and is like, is he a friend?
Yeah.
You know what I think he is? I like him. I could see myself loving him as much as I love Henry.
He has that thought very quickly.
It shows Roland's insane charisma.
Yeah.
But we feel the same way. So Eddie is so relatable in that moment because you're like, oh, I am at least. I assume you guys are. And our listeners probably are. You're right there with them. You're like, yep.
I'd follow this guy into battle.
I love him.
Yeah.
So this lasts for 2 hours. And Eddie finally pulls an intimidation tactic because there's an older guy there who's a little bit smarter than the rest of them.
Yeah.
And Eddie's been very careful about his drug use, like the month leading up to doing this job. There are no track marks visible. They are by his balls, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they are behind his balls.
And since I don't know where the balls are, I'm not sure how that works. If they're behind your balls, they're just on your penis.
That makes sense. No, that tracks.
Maybe I don't know the law, I guess. Even if they found track marks, having track marks isn't illegal, right?
No, but I think he's trying to hide that so that they don't have cause to do a drug test.
Even if they did they can't.
It's an illegal drug.
Arrest you because you have it in your system? I don't
the 80s.
see. I guess I don't know.
At the very least, it would delay things. And
Yeah.
then we're up
that's
against
true.
the clock
It'd
of
give them more
Roland's
leverage
poison.
to hold him. or-
Yeah.
I guess that's true.
But I do love that the final bluff comes into like, come on, just do a blood test. And he's like, fine.
I'll
but
do
all
it,
of
but-
you guys are doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they do not want to do that.
No.
And then the older guy is like, why don't you take off your shorts? And Eddie realizes, he knows the track marks are
Yeah.
somewhere
But he's
else.
just like, no.
No.
Yeah, he screams at him. He's
Yeah.
like, leave me alone. You have nothing. I know you have nothing. You do too. Get me my clothes and get me out of here. And the guy is like, you heard him. Get him out of here.
Get him out.
And as soon as he's out, he is being tailed. Not just by customs, but by a pizza truck, which is Balazar's pizza truck. He was supposed to exit the airport and get into a limo that was going to be waiting for him. And when that didn't happen, of course, Balazar is going to assume that he was caught. And depending on the amount of time that he spent being detained, he's either flipped or he's going to jail. And
Yeah.
he walked out those doors.
I love how specific it's that they know 2 hours can only mean this.
Yeah.
And no amount of explaining will convince anyone otherwise.
In the cab ride on the way to the apartment, Roland's trying not to be like in awe of everything he sees around him because he's still trying to think about what he needs to do. And he has to like leave him again while they're on their way to the apartment. And at some point, though, on the way to the apartment, Eddie stops at a hot dog stand. And he gets a hot dog for Roland. He gets a soda. He buys some aspirin.
He starts putting mustard on the hot dog, and then he's like, wait, I don't know if he likes that.
Maybe he'll hate that. Maybe it's poison to him. Never make that mistake. Always put mustard on everything.
Ugh.
Everybody's going to like it except
Gross.
for Ben. I can't with you right now about that. As he's making this transaction, Roland is explaining to Eddie, because Eddie's seen a few suspicious things, but basically Roland's like, actually, we are surrounded
Right.
by
He's like,
people.
yeah, these 2 people are following this. And he's like, actually, there's 3 more over here.
And Eddie feels bad and foolish that he didn't recognize that. And this is where he has that thought that he could learn to love Roland like he loves Henry. Roland goes back to his body to experience this food, Ben.
I love he drinks the soda because he's taking aspirin.
Aston.
Aston. And so he pops pills in his mouth and he takes a drink and immediately he's like, what the fuck? This rules. He immediately feels better and he knows that it is sugar. Like
You can
sugar
taste it, yeah.
exists in his world, but he's never had such a
Probably
concentration.
7 tablespoons of it all at once.
And he has this split second where he's like, he thinks about this language barrier that there is between him and Eddie, where when he is in Eddie's head, he doesn't understand every word, but he can pick out the meaning out of Eddie's head. And he thinks about heroin
Yeah.
and cocaine. And he's like, well, I've only heard of that while in Eddie's head. What if this thing that he's been, this cocaine, this horrible drug, what if that's just in our world sugar? What if that's what
It
we
has
call
to be sugar,
it has
right?
to
This
be
is
sugar.
amazing.
And of course, he immediately logics it out where he's like, no, I saw him buy this in public.
He
at a
wouldn't be
store."
smuggling
Yeah.
something he could buy just
Yeah,
freely.
it
It's
was-
really cool.
Yeah, it's a neat little thought experiment, but it's cool.
I love too, Roland starts to feel something towards Eddie. You know that phenomenon when, what's it called? When
Friendship.
someone's taking care of you.
Stockholm syndrome?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess. I thought it was something nicer, but yeah, he's getting a little Stockholmy for Eddie because he's great. He's so grateful to feel better and to have, like, the aspirin obviously isn't going to cure him, but it's definitely going to help. And he immediately, there's a voice inside his head that reminds him not to get too close to Eddie.
Martin.
And he's thinking of the guilt that he feels over Jake. And he knows that anyone he gets close to is not going to come out of this well.
What's the phrase? Do not let his heart near your hands, or is it the other way around?
Yeah.
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 Do not let.
Do not let your heart near his hands.
Yeah. So Eddie and Roland get to Eddie's apartment, but before he can go in, the pizza truck that was tailing him rolls up. And Eddie stiffens and he feels Roland stiffen inside of him. Those are the words, not me.
That's
Not in a sexy way. And Roland is like, you want to disappear? Like, say the words right now. We can do it. And Eddie's like, no. Let's just talk. I think we can talk our way out of this. So now we meet two of Balazar's men, Carl Vincent and Jack Andolini. What do you guys think of these two?
They suck.
I had a few feelings. First, I was like, oh, these are so... At first, they seem almost cartoonish.
Yeah.
Henchmen.
The henchmen. But then as it kept going, I had to think back to see if Jack Andolini was a name. I had to try and remember the name of the mobster from Thinner.
Janelli.
Yeah.
Who is mentioned.
Yes. Okay, I thought so. Because this guy, he's described as this huge, imposing caveman-looking dude. But that he is
Smarter than he
Balazar.
looks. Yeah. Oh, number one.
Yeah, he's the head lieutenant of this crime family because he is not only huge and terrifying, but also very smart.
Mm-hmm. And Vincent's just a jerk-off idiot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have a back and forth, and it's just kind of like talking through that. You got to come with us, Eddie. Of course, Balazar's worried. Like, he wants to check his stuff. Like, no big
He's like,
deal.
no, I need to go upstairs and make sure Henry's okay. Well, you don't need to. Henry's with us. And then as soon as he finds out Henry is with them, Roland, his internal monologue says something that's just like, wow, all you have to do to press this kid's buttons is bring up his brother.
Yeah.
And he, like, to me, I read it with an amount of pity.
Yeah.
I like this part because there's this dialogue where no one is telling each other the whole truth.
Right.
It is everyone playing this game of like subtle intimidation while playing friendly.
Yeah.
It's a really neat, it's a very tense scene.
It's very, very well
And Roland's kind of giving Eddie some guidance too while this is happening, because he's telling him to play it cool, and Eddie's like, how am I doing? And he's like, you're doing good. And it's I don't know, it's that teacher thing again that's happening. And so they make their way to Balazar's building, which
The tower.
freaks Roland out. Yeah, because it's called the Leaning Tower. And he comes forward, but he doesn't like take over. So Eddie's alarmed, but he's trying to reassure. He's like, hey man, whatever you think this is, it's just a building. Chill out. It's not.
It's just a fucking bar. Calm down.
And when that happens, though, Vincent sees Eddie's eyes change. And he tries to say something about it, but like, what do you say?
Right.
So he kind of gives up. So now we are going to meet Balazar and his house or tower of cards, which also, again, made me think of 11/22/63, like the discussion of, when he goes back the second time and he's trying not to mess anything up with Frank Dunning because it's like a house of cards and he wants to blow that house at the right time. I don't know. Balazar knows that Eddie is running for the feds, and he's already decided that he's just going to entertain this long enough to figure out what he did, and then he's going to kill them both, him and Henry. It's funny because like we get Eddie's steal from Balazar too.
Yeah.
Because he trusted Eddie, and his dad, I think, or somebody, his teacher, had told him never trust a junkie.
Good advice. Mm-hmm. I also like Balazar believes he understands who Eddie is through and through. He doesn't believe Eddie can do a single thing that surprises him because as far as he's concerned, he has also figured out, I control the brother, I control this guy, and he'll make no waves.
And speaking of which, Henry's in the next room with a bunch of Balazar's men playing Trivial Pursuit.
That might be my favorite part of this whole scene.
Really?
Is they're playing and they're keeping Henry drugged up just enough to keep him compliant. And every turn he answers the question, Johnny Cash. And he says, why do you say Johnny Cash to everything? And he says, because Johnny Cash is everything. And everybody gets a good laugh out of that.
All the stuff with Henry bums me out in such a major way.
The foreshadowing right here when we leave Henry and these guys.
Well, that and like the fact that the Johnny Cash bit shows the very, very last vestiges of what I assume Henry, the real Henry, was like, because it's a funny bit.
Yeah.
It's so obviously a joke.
Right.
That he is purposefully making this joke, but all of the goons are like, look at this dumb waste. when it's so obvious that it's just this dude who's shitty life. He ran out of luck, and now the only thing he can do is sit here wasted out of his mind and tell this dumb joke that they are all laughing at, not thinking that it is a joke on them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sad.
The payoff, though, is the round where it's not even the right category, but he makes up the clue that the answer, it's like 4 very clear examples. The answer is Johnny Cash.
And he says someone else.
Gives us someone else's name. And I think that's, like, to me, is that evidence of that the Johnny Cash answer has been a bit this whole time, and they don't see it. They just see
An idiot. Junkie,
Yeah.
As this is happening, Henry gets what's described to us as his last fix.
Yeah. His last rocket went up. And I had to read that sentence like 3 times.
Oh, you thought he had a boner?
Well, no. Fair point. Wouldn't surprise me in a Stephen King book if we got their last boner. It was the last erection he'd ever received.
And if it was described as his last rocket.
Last rocket going up, yeah. Jesus Christ. Just because I forgot Henry dies. Spoiler alert. And so, as we were getting to this point, I couldn't remember. I knew something had to happen to take Henry off the board. Otherwise, there's no way Eddie would willingly leave. So I was trying to remember what that was.
Same.
And it shocked me all over again because I expected him to die in the crossfire of a shootout. I expected it to be action or
not an accident.
Exactly. I didn't expect it to be accidental.
Yeah. You didn't expect it to be something that probably no matter what was happening was going to happen that day anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Like he's dying.
Yeah. No matter what else happened, Henry was going to die.
So Eddie is having a conversation with Balazar now, who, like I said, is ready to kill him. But Eddie convinces him to play along because Balazar likes magic.
He just fucking loves magic.
So he assures him that he has his stuff. And he's going to go into the bathroom and bring half of it out. And then Henry's going to go home and he's going to say a code word that they worked out beforehand that Roland's like, Eddie thinks they did. But Eddie might be wrong.
Yeah, he's also not sure.
Yeah. And Balazar is going to play along after putting another man deep inside Eddie to make sure he's not holding drugs.
The violence of that cavity search and strip search.
Yeah.
Like, Balazar quickly demonstrates that he's not fucking around a single bit.
He tells Andolini to check the bathroom, and Andolini's like, is there anything, secret compartment I don't know about? And he's like, yes. And we're going to find out that what's in that compartment is some nasty shit. He is going to die, and we're going to be very happy.
Yep.
While this is happening, we pop over to the other room where Henry has died. So Balazar agrees to let Eddie go in the bathroom, but Andolini's going to go with him, and Eddie starts to freak out, and Roland's like, no, man.
No, let him.
It'll be cool. It'll be fine.
No, it's cool.
I also kind of read it with that tone of like, no, let him. It'll be funny.
Yeah. So they go in there, and after arguing with him about whether or not the door is going to stay open.
And again, classic Eddie. Hey, he said he's not going to shut the door.
He's like, I'm losing faith in you, Balazar.
Yeah.
So he's like, just shut the door, Jack. So he does. And things happen pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
I love this. There's the door. He shows Andolini the door, and their scuffle spills out onto the beach. And Andolini, rightfully so, freaks the fuck out.
But knows instantly, like, oh, that's the guy I need to go after when he sees Roland.
Yeah.
This whole segment is so cool. My favorite part is when it cuts back to Balazar.
Yeah.
And he hears far off gunshots.
Blocks away.
And he's like, it could be fireworks, but when you're in my line of business, you don't think fireworks.
Yeah.
It's a very Steve moment from
but
Desperation.
Yes.
The fact that you hear distance
Yeah.
when he's just on the other side
it's
of
so
these
cool.
2 doors. It's very cool. But there is a scuffle. Roland yells, left hand, to remind Eddie
And himself.
that this guy has a gun. They fight. And in case we forgot to mention this, Eddie completely buck-ass naked
strip
this
search.
entire time.
Yeah.
I don't. There's a scuffle. Long story short, Eddie beans the guy with a rock
As he's about to shoot Roland. He saves his life.
Yeah. And Roland pulls off. I love that it's not the shot he intended to make, but it's the shot he got.
Because he wants to save him because he's important to Balazar and he thinks he's a negotiation tool.
Right. And so he planned on just shooting his elbow and shattering his elbow, but because being hit with the rock threw him off, he misses the one shot. And then when he lines up the second one, they fire close to the same time. And Roland, he's even like, that shot was a 1 in a million. I've only heard about that shit happening.
No, even better than that, he says, I've only seen it happen twice.
That's right.
I love that. He's like, it's an impossible shot. Of course I've seen it. I'm in a lot of gunfights. That's
I didn't
awesome.
even connect that.
Well,
that's great.
we don't even know it happened.
Yeah.
Because we get the fallout of it first because Andolini starts screaming and wanders off down the beach.
We're told he doesn't have a face anymore.
Yes. And then we find out that Roland's like, oh shit, my bullet went right into his gun, exploded his cartridges took off half his face. And the Lobstrosities take over from there.
Wanders into the Lobstrosities and
It's
decimate him.
bad enough that Eddie feels sympathy for him.
Well, because he's still fucking alive this whole time.
Yeah, isn't Eddie being like, kill him?
Yeah.
You need to kill him.
Yeah.
And Roland's like, nah, too late.
We've already wasted too many bullets.
So Eddie and Roland come back over. Roland's like, you got to bring me through with you because shit's about to get crazy.
But first, he gives him a gun.
Okay.
He's like, I don't want to do this.
I
really don't want to do this.
This is a huge moment because
Massive.
Eddie's like, I don't want to touch that. And Roland says, I don't want you to either. And then the book says, he says it like gently. It was because when that line is first coming out, I think he's like angry, but he's like, he knows he has to do it.
It's like
and
passing
he's
off
sad.
a child.
Yeah, but he trusts him.
He
and
has to. He doesn't have a choice.
He's so vulnerable. Oh, it's so hot.
He also accidentally gives Eddie the good gun, apparently.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, there are more live rounds in this one, as we'll find out in a moment. So he's like, okay, I'm going to come in with you. And they step out of the beach into the bathroom. And shit just goes even more wild from here.
Yeah, because just as this is happening, one of the goons from the other room comes in and is like, hey, boss, we killed Henry. Oops.
Henry's dead.
And Eddie hears that. And he starts to flip
the
out.
fuck out.
And I love that because he's about to put the antibiotics that he saw, not the child pornography though. He's going to leave that in his pocket. And then he's like, oh shit, I'm naked. And he hears that his brother's dead and he drops him in the sink and he turns to Roland and Roland's like
remember
medicine. and he's like, what do you want to do about it? And Eddie's like, go to war. And he's like,
go to war.
You don't know
over
what
this.
you're saying, but you're
let's
about to
fucking
find
go.
out.
Yeah.
And so he tells him again, because of my hand, you have to go to the right, I'll go to the left.
And they fucking open up.
Fucking do it.
I love that Balazar on the other side of the door goes, Jack, kill him. Just kill him. I'm done with this. He can sense shit's gone sideways,
he's been
but
more
he
and
doesn't
more
know
uneasy
how.
as this is going on.
Because he hears Eddie yelling, they killed my brother. And he's like, he's not talking to Jack.
Yeah.
Look at that realization.
And how could that possibly? It's just
Exactly.
so cool.
It's all of this impossible feeling.
So Balazar sees Eddie come out of the bathroom with Roland and not Andolini, and he hesitates. But Jimmy, one of his goons, doesn't. He is still too late, though, because as he fires, Roland shoots a hole through this guy's chest.
Yeah.
And now everybody else is starting to come in. They are firing. My note is just Roland is so cool.
The gunfight is so
is Eddie.
fucking rad.
I love
And
that
Eddie
Roland takes
kicks
a
ass.
second in the middle of this gunfight to be like, that kid's fighting naked. Good for him.
Well, he's like, he's got the steel because
Yeah.
like not only is he in his first gun battle, but he's doing it naked. Most men would not be able to pull that off. So they're outnumbered. Things aren't looking good. Fortunately, some idiot comes in with a rapid fire weapon. I love, we get this little bit about
what do they call it? They call it something
The
hilarious.
Rambo
Yeah,
murder
the Rambo machine
Yeah,
or
something like that.
We get a moment where it's like, in the movies, this is always cool. In real life, these things are really not accurate.
They're 4 shots before the recoil and the rapid fire fuck your entire aim, essentially.
And he's so like weapons less that he's like, hey, get out of the way, everybody. And then before anybody can get out of the way, like his own guys, he starts firing and shoots into his own. Yeah. Eddie ends up killing that guy, and Balazar shoots Eddie and grazes his left bicep. And we jump over to Roland, who's still cool, calm, and collected as always. And he's, again, shooting people and thinking, Eddie's doing a good job. We're partners. And he also sees this bravery in Eddie as he puts himself in harm's way because he thinks that Roland is out of ammo now because he starts firing duds. Yeah. And fortunately, though, for both of them, Balazar is not as cool in a fight, and he's only paying attention to Eddie. So Roland picks up the dead guy's gun that feels cheap in his hands.
He's like, this thing sucks.
And he shoots him 4 times.
Yeah.
Seems like they got everyone when something completely ridiculous happens.
And here's the part I completely forgot. This is the reveal.
Yeah.
Because at one point, Balazar makes a comment about how he'll cut off Henry's head and show it to Eddie. And then one of the goons... Kevin.
His name is Kevin.
Fucking Kevin. In a classic Kevin move.
Y'all, we need to talk about Kevin.
He had cut off Henry's head and just lobs Henry's head into the room.
Think about this, though, from this guy's perspective. Mm-hmm. You get a call from your boss, all hands on deck, we're at war, you hear insane gunfire, there's an automatic weapon, but you are going to stop and cut a guy's head off.
Dead man's head off.
Which is not a quick task, I'm thinking.
I would assume that.
His plan is solid. Honestly, if there's a gunfight and there's automatic
You're
weapon
gonna
fire,
cut off
I'm also
somebody's
not
head.
going.
Oh.
Yeah, this guy was playing the long game.
Yeah.
He said, I
was busy. I was doing that thing you wanted.
I'm decapitating this guy and I'll hang out.
Can't join,
and
guys.
when the gunfire stops, I'll either walk in with a decapitated head and congratulate you all on a job well done, or I'll throw it in the room and kill the guys who survived.
Kevin's the smartest guy in
this
book.
He really is. It would have worked if he had been lucky enough to not be in a fight with a gunslinger.
True, because Eddie reacts instantly and mindlessly. He runs over debris. His feet are bleeding. He's stepping on glass. He's firing blanks. Mm-hmm. And Kevin is crouching down to line up his shot. And fortunately for Eddie, Roland sees all this. He knows how he's going to take the shot.
As soon as the head flies through the door, he's like, "Oh, the guy's going low."
Yep.
He's gonna be going low and is already aiming.
And he shoots him before he can kill Eddie. Although Eddie stands over him, dry firing into his corpse. And Roland can hear the sirens coming, and he tries to stop Eddie. And Eddie hauls off and just hits him over the head with his own gun and knocks him out for a couple minutes. When Roland comes to, he sees something that would very much upset me. Eddie, naked, sitting in the middle of the room, cradling his brother's severed head and crying.
Yeah, not a fan.
No.
Roland tells him they have to go. Eddie's going to get arrested. They're on their way, and he says he doesn't care. And Roland tells him, this may not matter to you, but there are others involved. Prisoner. He calls him prisoner. Yeah. He's called him prisoner a few times, and Eddie's had to kind of like just ignore it because
stop calling me that. And he says, I will stop calling you that when you show me you can walk out of this cell.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fucking
and then
awesome.
He tells him to throw that rotten piece of meat away.
Yep.
Meaning Henry's head.
That's what it is now.
And he pulls Eddie out of things enough that Eddie asks Roland what's waiting for him on the other side. And Roland tells him the truth. He says,
adventure and death.
Yeah, probably death, but also the tower, and the tower is sick, and you're going to want to see it.
I think it was around this point that I'm like, I had forgotten that King did not bother hiding the fact that he didn't know what the fuck the tower was.
Yeah.
In my head, the entire, the gunslinger is like, I'm going to the tower. My goal is the tower. But here, Eddie's like, what's the tower? And Roland's like, I don't fucking know.
It's the tower.
It's the tower. Shut up.
It's the linchpin.
It's our destiny.
I had forgotten that what the tower is completely unimportant. Mm-hmm. it's just the tower. Stop thinking about it, nerd. Just it's a tower. What more do you need?
That it's a mission of faith.
Yeah.
He has no concrete evidence as to what will happen if what he thinks will happen is even going to when he gets there.
He doesn't ask questions.
No.
We know that. So he tells him that there are 2 more that he has to draw, but he doesn't know them. He'll draw them soon. And Eddie understands that what he means is what he did to him. He drew him.
I also love that this is, at this point, there's like tear gas being shot in because the police have arrived and busted in. And Roland knows, I could just grab this kid and fucking go, and it's done. But he respects him enough based on what they went through and what he's done for him that he authentically wants Eddie to make the choice for himself.
And for some reason, his speech of death and failure for Eddie really just sounds cool enough, and Eddie's in. So he gives him his clothes, tells him to get his shoes, he grabs the medicine, and they link arms, as I imagine it. And
they off to see the wizard it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And they step through the door just as another is busted down and the police file in. As soon as Eddie and Roland step through the door, though, Eddie remembers that he likes drugs and there didn't seem to be any on this beach. So he's got to go back. And Roland is like, fuck that. Slams the door shut.
So good. I love the sound, even though there's nothing that it connects to. It's such a good detail.
And the door, like, once they're both through it and it's shut, all the magic is gone. It's just a door. It falls onto the beach. And there's no, like, aliveness to it anymore. And the words, the prisoner, have disappeared. So it's closed forever. Eddie falls to the ground screaming and crying. And Roland is like, your need will pass, which is pretty cold as he takes his own drugs.
All of the drugs for me and none for Eddie is what he says later.
but then he lays down and he basically like spoons Eddie and they eventually fall asleep.
I'd kind of forgotten that they share this first night together.
Yeah.
Holding each other for warmth as he's fighting infection and Eddie's fighting withdrawals. They're both in such weakened states. I just forgot how vulnerable the shuffle is.
Yeah, which is the last section that we're covering on this episode, shuffle. And it's really cool because we get these short paragraphs of the next like almost week that end with the word shuffle. And when we come back to the next paragraph, we're leaping forward in time. So it's a cool way for the reader to sense the disorientation that Roland feels while he's in this state and trying to survive.
Because it says it was about a week?
It was about. So the honeymoon period is over for Eddie and Roland. And during this week-ish time that passes, Eddie is taking care of Roland while he is struggling through his own withdrawal. I'm just going to kind of go through like each of the moments and we can talk about things that you guys want to touch on. So Roland comes to and Eddie has food for him. And he can tell that Eddie's really sick and he smells like death and excrement. And he tries to comfort Eddie. He reaches for him and Eddie slaps his hand away and he tells him he's going to feed him, but he ought to kill him instead. So we're seeing him like I imagine going through withdrawal makes you angry.
I imagine.
If you don't have any help.
Also, being in a weird alien world probably doesn't help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he also tells him, if I didn't think that you could open another door and get me back to my world, I would kill you. And I also don't want to be alone here. So we're stuck with each other. And then we shuffle. Roland comes to again and he's trying to tell Eddie that they need to go north. And Eddie's like, how do you know that? And Roland's like, I just know that. And he starts to pass out again when Eddie slaps him awake.
I did love that.
Yeah, he slaps him awake and he's like, you have to take your medicine. I don't have a clock, but the sun's about where it is when you take your medicine.
I'm not a fucking Boy Scout.
And he puts a pill in his mouth and like basically throws the water onto his face because he's mad at him. And when Roland starts to choke on the water, Eddie just stares coldly at him. And he starts to get up and Roland reaches for him and Eddie's, trying to slap his hand away again. But even in this weakened state, something about Roland commands Eddie's attention. And so he listens and Roland tells him that he can either live or die. It doesn't really matter to him. And it's just so cool that he's barely alive. And he's like, I'm going to tell you how it is, even though I'm literally depending on you to live right now. And Eddie starts to get upset and he screams at him, who are you? And Roland tells him, I'm your destiny. And Eddie's like, eat shit and die in response to that.
Yeah.
Roland is really romantic.
Yeah.
He wakes to a gunshot and then we have a shuffle. And then he wakes up to dinner. Eddie's starting to look better, you guys. He tells Roland they're getting closer to him, though. They're not, these things aren't stupid. And Roland's trying to catch up, like, what are you talking about? And Eddie's like, they know what I've been doing.
Yep. He's been just before sundown when they are just coming out and they're more docile. He's been going out and killing one for their dinner.
Yep. They're eating lobstrosities. And Roland's like,
Freaks
dude,
out.
that's fucked up.
They're not threaded stock.
They're poison. And Eddie's like, so are rattlesnakes, but people eat them and I'm still alive.
Right.
And what else did you want to eat?
He's like, I cooked the shit out of it.
And he's like, I like to think, I love this part about Eddie. He's like,
do
I
love-
like to think that I'm eating a little bit of Jack Angelini.
Yeah.
And Roland's like, yeah, and my fingers. And Eddie's like,
that's
that's
cool too."
Fucking Eddie rules.
The next time Roland comes to, he's being dragged along the beach by a contraption that Eddie made. And later on, when he sees what this is, he thinks, man, Court would have slapped the shit out of Eddie for making something so clumsy. And then immediately he's like, actually, I'm wrong. Like, Court would have probably been proud and praised him because he actually did something. So,
and it's fairly impressive with
Yeah.
the things he found. Like
cobbled
it's,
together.
sticks. It's some of the what does he call it? Sticky rope that was used to hold the drugs to him. Shoestrings. Just everything at his disposal.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
So he knows that, Eddie may not have the skill and knowledge of a gunslinger, but his heart is in the right place, which I love this part because for me, this began like the start of me understanding what a gunslinger is through Roland's eyes and applying that, like every chance I get to any character that I read in any book, even if it's not King. And it just, I don't know, it's a really important thing that this book does for the series, this book starts. And it's one of the reasons that the drawing of the three is so good. So Eddie tells Roland how bad things were for him while Roland was like in his more delirious state.
They're finally like repairing their bond.
The rapport.
Yeah, their rapport. And Eddie basically says, I'm feeling good now, but there were a few of those nights when you were in and out that I took the gun, I thought about it, and just couldn't do it.
And Roland, asks him like what made him stop. And this is where he gives, I think we might have alluded to it before, that speech of some people need people.
Yep.
And I really like this because he's like, you're not one of those people, which is a blessing and a curse because you are smart enough to know that fact. So even though you know that, you do it anyway, and then you feel the guilt and the pain of it. It's like, ooh.
You're smart enough for it to hurt.
He knows Roland.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was just about to say.
Yeah.
Eddie fucking reads him to filth.
Yeah.
It is so spot on that it really, they've known each other for so little. The entire time they've known each other, one of them has been like nearly comatose practically. But Eddie just fucking gets Roland's entire thing.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen that since Roland's childhood, which we don't even know that yet. We'll know that in Wizard and Glass, but it's like even reading it, having read the series, it's cool just to come to that moment. And I think the vulnerability too of the position Roland is in lets Eddie in a way that I don't know. Maybe it would have at least taken a lot longer.
Roland says that I'm treating you square. I'm not dancing around anything. I'm going to shoot you straight because it's the least I can do for you. And that's how Roland does it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know where you stand with it.
Yeah.
Eddie tells Roland that, you're a junkie too. You're a tower junkie. And then Roland, you can't talk bad about his tower because he lashes out and he hurts Eddie emotionally. He asks him a question Eddie asked Roland earlier, which was, what war were you in that shot off your sense of humor?
Yeah.
And he asks him, what war were you in that shot your sense of nobility and purpose? When Eddie was like, fuck the tower, whatever, you're a tower junkie. So Eddie excuses himself he's like, oh, something in my eye, I gotta go get up and rinse it out. And Roland can see that he's made him cry.
Yeah, this part also is the part in the book so far that has worked the least for me. That's such a lame burn.
So we jump 3 days. Roland is steadily getting better and he can start walking on his own a little bit. And eventually he doesn't even need to be drugged by Eddie at all. They just have to stop every couple hours and rest for a little bit. And as they continue to walk, Eddie tells Roland his story, a story that Roland doesn't need to be told because he understands instantly what the deal is with Eddie and his brother, but Eddie's telling it. Roland realizes that Eddie is not telling it to Roland. Eddie is finally in a state of mind where he is telling it to himself for the first time.
The long and short of it is that they had a rough childhood. Their mother put all the pressure on Henry to watch out for Eddie and take good care of him. We don't know what the situation was exactly with their mom, but it sounds like she didn't care to pay attention because Henry just got
Didn't
Eddie,
or couldn't or whatever, yeah.
just got into shit all the time. And it was the excuses. It wasn't that Henry was stupid. It's that he had to take care of Eddie, so he had no time to study for a thing.
He wasn't in sports because of Eddie, not because he was scrawny.
Right,
and didn't want to be in sports.
Right, and then it's like, despite all the hours he could have done those things, we're not going to talk about. But essentially, Eddie grew up his whole life feeling indebted to his brother because the reason his life is so good,
happily indebted,
is because his brother sacrificed so much. Which is a story I think plenty of people can relate to, where you take on, if it hadn't been for him making all those sacrifices, none of this would have ever happened. But that's consolidating a million choices to one thing that happened that was out of everyone's control. And Eddie's the kind of person who says it very openly. I need people. I need to be needed.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, Henry needed him. He realized that there was the emotional abuse of, he caught him doing the heroin and he was like, get out of here. And then his brother said, you're right. I'm a piece of garbage. If I jumped out the window right now, it'd be better. That's what I'm going to do. Essentially, that kind
makes
of dramatic.
Makes him argue with him into staying.
Exactly.
Instead of
just
kicking
manipulates him. And
Yeah.
that's like Roland also picks that up of that Henry was the kind of person who only knew how to use trust.
Yeah.
And that's what he did, because he tells a story about them stealing a car and Henry came back for him.
Yeah, he ran off when they saw the cops,
Yeah.
but he came back and Eddie was so impressed.
Right. But Roland is like, he only came back because he knew that would keep you indebted forever. Yeah.
Yeah. And he also, anytime they kind of have these arguments where Eddie's like, what are you doing, Henry? After being manipulated, like within a few days, now Eddie's doing drugs. Yep. And then when he starts the needlework, they have a big blowout again. And Henry does the same thing. He's like, you know what? You're right. I'm just a useless junkie. You'd be better off without me. I'll go. And Eddie's like, how dare you leave me?
Yeah.
And then Eddie's shooting up.
Yep.
Oh, we also find out Henry was in a war and he busted his knee. Yeah. So there's just all kinds of excuses, but it's the war is what got him addicted to drugs, because he was on, like, I assume morphine and stuff. And then when he came out, he needed that fix. We also, during this, get some insight into what happened to Roland's crew, because at some point, Roland, he doesn't think this, but King thinks it for him. Like, it's that question of why Eddie? Like, it's like Roland wouldn't think that. Why this guy? This seems like a terrible idea. He promises weakness and maybe even doom. But Roland wouldn't have asked that, but Cuthbert would have. Cuthbert questioned everything. He was poisoned with questions, and he died with a question in his mouth. And they're all gone, all 13 of the surviving gunslingers, except for one, and that's Roland. So Eddie finishes his story, and Roland can tell he's just waiting for him to ask the question, to do the polite, expected conversational thing, tell him what he thinks of all of it. And when Roland doesn't, Eddie's like, okay, well, what do you think? And Roland is like, I think you're here, and that's all I've got for you.
Fair.
And Eddie's like, what the fuck, man? Like, I just poured my heart out to you, and that's all you have. And Roland's like, hey, man, don't blame me. It's Ka. Eddie is not interested in that answer, and he basically is like, I deserve better than that from you. I put my life on the line for you. And Roland's like, yes, and that's why I've shot straight with you. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, by the way, I saw it an hour ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so like random.
He's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he's like, there, like gestures north. And he's like, all right, I have 20/20 vision. If there was something to see, I'd fucking see it. And he's like, I don't know what 20/20 vision is, but you'll see it by sundown.
An hour later, he does.
Yep. Another freestanding door.
A door. Yep. As they approach it, they see the words, the Lady of Shadows. And Eddie's like, oh, this is where you're going to draw your second of the three. And Roland's like, oh, I see what you're doing. He instinctively knows what Eddie's about to do.
Eddie pulls the gun on him and says, I'm going in. And Roland tries to explain to him, just because the door that led me to you went to your universe in your time does not mean this door goes to your planet in your time. And Eddie's not having it and puts the gun. He's like, I'll fucking do it. And Roland turns
like,
away from him
all
and
right, man,
opens
it's
the door,
cock. You're
waiting
gonna
to
do
see
it,
if he's
you're
going to
gonna
get
do it.
shot. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's where we leave off, is him
Yeah.
opening the door. And that's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. Join us for our next episode, where we will be covering Through Reshuffle. For Benjamin Graham and CM Alexander, I'm Joshua Kahn, reminding you, I am, in short, a man on the edge of everything.
Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to The Drawing of the Three, Part 1. We hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts at Facebook and Instagram at Derry Public Radio and X at Derry Public. And you can send us an email at derrypublicradio@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our Etsy store for merchandise and our Patreon for bonus episodes every other week. And we have a lot of episodes that you can download as soon as you become a member at the $5 and up tier. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.